We've just learned Joe Biden and his wife Jill Biden have tested negative for the coronavirus today after possible exposure at the debate on Tuesday night, following stunning news that President Trump and the First Lady tested positive for the novel coronavirus. This is Outnumbered Overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. The President and First Lady are now in self-quarantine at the White House. Chief of Staff Mark Meadows says doctors are monitoring their health, but the President will continue working. Meadows gave this update.
The president does have mild symptoms. He continues to be not only in good spirits, but very energetic. The American people can rest assured that we have a president that is not only on the job, will remain on the job, and I'm optimistic that he'll have a very quick and speedy recovery.
And with the Chief of Staff, that was the first time we'd heard officially from the White House. But coming up, I'll be talking first time for one-on-one coming out of the White House, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany. All of this comes 32 days before the election. Dr. Oz will join us to react in moments. First, let's go to the latest. And White House correspondent John Roberts. John.
Harris, good afternoon to you. Mark Meadows, the Chief of Staff, as you saw there, saying that the president is continuing to work from the residence. However, the president was supposed to chair a conference call on COVID support for vulnerable seniors in the noon hour. It was supposed to begin at 12:15, but we learned that the president did not get on the call. Instead, the vice president took his place on that call. No reason was given for why the president, and this was the only thing that was on his schedule today, did not handle that call. Perhaps you can get some more from Kayleigh McEnany at the half hour. Mark Meadows also would not talk about what kind of treatment the president is getting. We asked him about hydroxychloroquine because the president did take hydroxychloroquine in the past and has said he would likely take it again if he were to become ill. But you can bet that Dr. Sean Conley, who is the White House physician, is doing everything that he can in order to stop the president from progressing to severe coronavirus disease. The TikTok for this whole thing started on Wednesday and the trip out to Minnesota. This is when presidential advisor Hope Hicks began to feel ill. She was isolated aboard Air Force One for the return trip, we're told. Thursday morning, she took a COVID test, which came back positive later in the day. The Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, saying that the president and the rest of the White House senior staff discovered that Hicks had tested positive just before the president left for a fundraising roundtable in Bedminster yesterday. Here's Mark Meadows.
In terms of Hope Hicks, we discovered that right as the Marine One was taking off yesterday. We actually pulled some of the people that had been traveling and in close contact. The reason why it was reported out, just frankly, is that we had already started the contact tracing just prior to that.
Now, President Trump has certainly been keeping up a vigorous campaign schedule. Last Friday alone, doing events in 4 states, then the debate on Tuesday, then 2 events in Minnesota on Wednesday. The White House Medical Office has got protocols in place to prevent the president from getting sick. Despite those, though, he became infected. Again, Mark Meadows.
What you have is a virus that is contagious, that certainly continues to be, regardless of whatever protocol we have, that it has the ability to affect everybody. As you know, the president, we keep a pretty wide circle. All of you that have interacted with him know that. And so even with that wide circle around the president, we find that he's having to deal with this.
We also got an update from the First Lady Melania Trump this morning. She tweeted out, quote, "Thank you for the love you are sending our way. I have mild symptoms, but overall feeling good. I am looking forward to a speedy recovery." A lot of things, of course, Harris, up in the air. Campaign events the president was supposed to go to today in Florida and Wisconsin. He will not be going to those. One of the big questions is, how does he handle rallies going forward? Does he maybe beam in virtually on a big screen, or does he send Mike Pence to do those? And then what about the next presidential debate on October the 15th? Will that go ahead as scheduled? At the moment, it seems to be on track, but we don't know what the health of the president will be 2 weeks from now. Harris?
Yeah, those are all the great political questions that come first, but I would start with the health, and that's where I'm going to go. John, good to see you. I want to bring in Dr. Mehmet Oz now, host of the Dr. Oz Show. And Dr. Oz, thanks for being with me today. So I want to jump right in with what this diagnosis means for President Trump. He is an energetic 74-year-old man who now is tested positive for COVID-19. What does that mean?
Well, put some numbers on it because we've had enough cases now that we can tell. if you've got an age of 74, compared to someone who's in their 20s, let's say, you have a 5 times the rate of being hospitalized. And I'm going to say this carefully, 90 times more chance of dying, but the chance of dying when you're in your 20s is very low. So overall, that by itself still gives President Trump a more than 90% chance of getting through this without major issues. What does concern me is his body mass index, which is a way of us gauging how much extra weight he has. At 244 pounds, I calculated it, for a 6'3" person would calculate it over 30, which is the medical definition of obesity. And obesity was the major predictor of being hospitalized if you got sick in New York City with COVID-19. It was also a major mortality risk. And the reason for that, Harris, is important for people to understand. When you're overweight, it causes inflammation in your body. The virus causes inflammation in your body. Oftentimes, you're not dying from the virus, or you're not getting hurt by the virus. You're getting hurt by the overreaction of your body's immune system. So the inflammation builds on itself. You get too much, and that cascade can cause all kinds of complications, including some of the longer-term issues that we're seeing.
You know what? When you're in the presence of this particular president, he's not the only president that I've ever interviewed, but he is somebody who, it stands out in my mind, he is bounding with energy. It is, his schedule would be punishing anyway in an election year as an incumbent president. But does that matter? Just the fact that we know that his vices don't include social activities like drinking and smoking. We know because he shared that with us as a nation, and all of this energy. And health, he says he feels good. Doctors have said he's okay. How much does that play? How much can that counterbalance? And look, it's a premorbidity, obesity. We already know that.
It matters a lot. You can calculate his real age, which is how old his body thinks he is. And he was on my show 4 years ago before his first election, in his first campaign. And I've looked at the numbers as he's gone through with his White House checkups. And he doesn't have diabetes. He doesn't have high blood pressure. He doesn't have medications for those either. He doesn't have kidney problems, lung issues. To your point, he's not taking habits like cigarette smoking, alcohol that could cause issues as well. Those all bode well for him. But we've had a lot of people who've been overweight and a lot of people who've been older who've gotten COVID-19. Most do well. Some do not. And it's definitely a higher risk, for example, compared to his wife, Melania, who's a female. That's a lower risk. Age 50, lower risk. And without the extra weight, lower risk.
You know, I'm looking at some of the video that we've popped up here. What are some of the therapeutics that are available to the president today that you would say, yeah, I would go for that for this reason?
Well, Harris, one of the bits of good news around this pandemic is we've gotten better at managing people with COVID-19. The mortality rates are probably half what they were when the virus first hit us. And that's not because the virus has changed as much as we've gotten better at our protocols. So he's probably already on zinc. He's probably already on an antiviral. Remdesivir has shown some benefit. Whether you need it before you develop significant symptoms or not, that's to be debated. But generally earlier it seems to be better. His White House staff is, I'm sure, all over that. The bigger question for me is if he develops worse symptoms and if the illness progresses, would they put him on steroids to prevent the bad complications of the inflammation I mentioned earlier? That's an approach that's been hugely successful in several trials. I suspect the White House team would decide to do that if the disease progresses. It's not smart to give it now because if his immune system is still battling the virus for the first time, you don't want to hinder it.
All right. A lot of positives in all of that. And something that really jumps out at me is how much we are learning. Look, I know it's a novel virus. We don't know everything. Dr. Oz, you tell me that every time we see each other. But we are getting closer, and I appreciate taking the journey with you. Here is President Trump virtually at the Al Smith dinner last night. Watch this, and I'm curious to get your reaction.
I just want to say that the end of the pandemic is in sight, and next year will be one of the greatest years in the history of our country.
Dr. Oz, the end of the pandemic is in sight. Is he right?
Well, we're going to know for sure in about a month. We've just been finishing enrollment of the 2 big 30,000 people trials in this country. And it takes about 6 weeks, let's say, to figure out if they're safe. And hopefully we'll know efficacious results by then. But I can't imagine that some of these vaccines aren't going to pan out. And if that's the case, once we protect first responders and the most vulnerable of the population, we're going to start feeling pretty good about beating the pandemic. So I think 6 more months. It's not going to be finished this year, but we're not far. But I think there's a big message here, Harris, we shouldn't forget. You can't test yourself to safety. The best way to stay safe is to stay far away from others if you can and wear a mask if you can't. Those are lessons that I think we're all learning from this experience.
You can't test yourself to safety. A couple of things. Emergency authorization for those first responders we're anticipating to go through sometime in late November. You're saying possibly a workable, viable vaccine. Still the spring of 2021, but we can get there. Look at what we've been through. Before I let you go, when you were on the program the last time, we talked about the flu season. I have a sore arm today because I just got my flu shot last night. We're about to enter that season. Please explain to my audience the significance between COVID-19 and the flu and getting a flu shot.
The big problem with the flu is you're not going to know if your symptoms are the flu or COVID-19. So it creates this twindemic phenomenon where you're going to be forced to get tested for things you normally wouldn't have bothered with. There's also some data, most of it modeling, that shows that places where there's more flu seems to have more COVID-19 complications. And so if you want to avoid being part of these modeling strategies and being a statistic, I think it makes a lot of sense this year, even if you've never gotten vaccinated for the flu before, to get the vaccine. Like you, I got vaccinated last week, got my whole team vaccinated. I think it's a smart move. It's also a kind move to others. You're just going to reduce the confusion in our world as we're dealing with COVID-19.
Before I let you go, just real quickly, back to the president, other people around him. What is the sphere of spread that you would be concerned about? 2, 3 people? Is there a time period? What are you looking at?
Well, strictly speaking, and I heard you talking about this earlier, it's about a 10-day isolation period for the president, because he's already showing symptoms. So he's got to be really strict, but only for 10 more days. If he doesn't have major symptoms and test negative, he can go back, for example, and debate. But the people around him have to be quarantined for about 14 days. What he defined as around him, closer than 6 feet, more than 15 minutes. That's what exposure means, the 6-15 rule. Those folks are probably going to have to sit on the sidelines for 2 weeks. That's a lot of people in his senior leadership group because they're the ones who spend time with him. And unfortunately, that 2-week period is hard to shorten because many folks do not show symptoms, won't even have virus coming out of their body for 4, 5, 6 days after being exposed.
Wow.
So getting tested today and showing you're negative doesn't help us that much.
Dr. Oz, always a pleasure to get your expertise. Thank you for your time today. And we, of course, together wish the president well and the First Lady. Thank you.
God bless you, Harris.
You too. Well, it is October, and it is a surprise like no other. President Trump testing positive for COVID-19 just 32 days before the election, forcing his campaign to take a look at things. How will it look going forward? The president had been planning to hit some key battleground states in the coming days, including Florida, Wisconsin twice, actually, and Arizona. Fox News contributor Carl Rove joins me now. Carl, thank you for being here. Let's start there, how this immediately impacts things, and can the president just kick it virtual? His backers or his supporters are kind of different. They want to be with him.
Yeah, they do. So he's going to have to figure out how to be with them in virtual ways. For example, he can do a telephone town hall where literally his supporters are given a phone number to dial in and he delivers a message over that. He also can deliver messages through the traditional means. For example, let's say that he spends a morning talking to different people around the country who are going to be adversely impacted by Joe Biden's vow in the debate to eliminate the Trump tax cuts, all of the Trump tax cuts. So talk to some middle-class families who are going to be negatively impacted by seeing their rates go back up and their child tax credit go down, and that they're going to lose several $1,000s a year in higher taxes. Have him talk to them, and then have him call into a program that he likes and have him deliver a focused message to the American people on what that's going to mean to them. So, you know, in politics, when you got faced with adversity, when you're given lemons, make lemonade, and the president's going to have to find a way to occupy the time in the next 14 days. And the irony is that he may be more focused and disciplined by doing so. He's not going to be going to Duluth, Minnesota, and giving a speech for 70 minutes and say something wild. He's going to be focused and disciplined.
You know, I am curious about how this perhaps undercuts some of the messaging that the president has had around the pandemic. I mean, it takes no genius to look at the situation and know that we are in an election year and things will be said out on the campaign trail. And I'm wondering, you know, does he change that message? Does he make it more focused? Because Joe Biden was picking up speed in the polling on coronavirus and the topic.
Well, the president was suffering attacks by Biden. I think, incidentally, those were unfair because Joe Biden, if you go back and look at the record, what Joe Biden was saying in January, February, and March, you know, he opposed not only the China travel ban, but the European travel ban. And his people, the people who were advising him on this issue, were saying things that were completely, you know, Ezekiel Emanuel, Dr. Emanuel, said, don't go out and buy a mask. It won't do any good. Erwin Rhinelander, a doctor advising Biden, said the likelihood of people dying is remote, very unlikely. His chief advisor, Ron Klain, said, we're not facing a health pandemic. We're facing a fear pandemic, accusing the president of hyping the threat from coronavirus. So Biden himself, when he gave a speech on March 13th laying out his plan on this, never mentions masks, never mentions social distancing, never mentions lockdowns. And of course, his administration left behind a empty cupboard of PPE material because they ran through it and didn't resupply it. So, you know, it's unfair, but yes, the president now is going to be in a different place. I don't think a lot of people are going to go around saying, see, we told you so, even you got it. What we do know about this disease is that anybody can get it. Yeah, well, we've already had them. They're already saying it. Go take a look at the social media and some of these prominent Democrats.
Yeah. You know, politically speaking, though, we know that the litmus test for humanity is when you can take the high road and wish somebody well when you know they're down.
Biden did the right thing. He and his wife did the right thing.
Yeah. All right, real quickly, I want to take a look at some other notable October surprises that have wreaked havoc on past presidential campaigns, including two. You were actually working with George W. Bush campaign in 2000 and 2004. What is your idea of something that happens around the 1st or the 2nd, and then the campaign is, you know, brought forward to Election Day? You mentioned some of the positives that could come.
Well, you know, most of the time, October surprises are not pleasant for whoever gets the surprise. In 2000,
no doubt.
The news was leaked that 20 years before, George W. Bush had been arrested for a DUI and Kenny Bunkford for driving 10 miles an hour down Ocean Boulevard. That broke the Thursday before the 2000 election. Wasn't helpful. You could just see the polls tighten up, and particularly starting on the East Coast where the news broke first. 2004, the so-called October surprise was a tape delivered by Osama bin Laden castigating President Bush, but it simply reminded people that President Bush was a wartime leader and didn't affect his standing in the polls.
All right. Good to see you. Thank you for being here,
Harris.
Carl.
You bet.
President Trump's positive test for COVID-19 is now raising also national security concerns. We've talked about health and politics, how the administration plans to move forward. We'll get into it in a live report. And coming up shortly, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, first one-on-one with the White House on how the president is doing in minutes. President Trump testing positive for COVID-19, raising a red flag about the number of people he may have come in contact with recently. And dozens of those people over the past week who work with him or were at rallies or events. Meanwhile, New Jersey's governor says state officials have begun contact tracing after the president's big event fundraiser in Bedminster, New Jersey yesterday. I want to bring in White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, who, by the way, tested negative yesterday and today. I was relieved to hear that. I know you're a new mom.
Thank you,
wish
Harris.
the best, Kayleigh, to you and your family. Absolutely. Look, this is tough for anybody to learn. He's the president of the United States with a lot on his plate. When did the president learn of Hope Hicks' positive COVID-19 result? Because that's kind of the beginning of our learning about it in the media through her. So when did the president know about Hope Hicks?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Hope. I'm not going, or excuse me, Harris. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not going to get into an exact timeline, but safe to say the president took precautions. He learned of his positive test last night within an hour. We put out that information to the American people. I spoke to him, and he was in very good spirits and is having mild symptoms right now.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about how he and the First Lady are doing in a moment. Some concern today is that Hope Hicks had traveled to Cleveland, Ohio. And we don't know if that's where the original spread happened, but we say that because the president was with her, was closely with her, and the First Lady. And in terms of notifying staff and journalists, people on the ground at that next event in Minnesota, they would have traveled together after she was known to have to have tested positive. She had signs, symptoms on the plane. Air Force One, it's been reported they quarantined her on the plane. What were some of the decision making around not maybe notifying people then?
So I was unaware of what was going on Air Force One, but I can tell you this. Immediately when she got a positive result, and I think the chief answered this question this morning as to the timeline of just before Marine One yesterday, immediately there was contact tracing that was put into place and all of the necessary procedures. Contact tracing takes time, but rest assured we will always do what is in the best interest of the American people and those around, and I have confidence in the White House medical unit to make the right decisions as they did with Hope and with others.
What are some of the protocols, Kayleigh, that are changing? You know, I watch you every day with your White House press briefing, and as a mom, I'm always concerned because there's some mask wearing, but it's a tight space that you guys are in. And you're not wearing a mask because you're speaking and you're at the lectern. Are those things going to change? Are you going to take them outside as long as the weather will permit? And by the way, I'd stand in snow. I don't really care about the weather.
Yes, you know, look, we put in place safety procedures. The White House Correspondents Association has spaces in between the chairs. We wear masks in the White House when we can't socially distance. The president, we make sure we're always 6 feet away and we stay away from each other. So we'll move forward with those same procedures, and we believe that we will protect those here in the White House as we come to work, as we're essential workers.
You know, the president's positive test results have also put other big events in question, like the vice presidential debate set for next Wednesday, I believe it is, and the second presidential debate scheduled for October 15th. That debate between President Trump and Joe Biden falls within the president's 14-day quarantine period. What is the plan right now?
So we haven't gotten that far just yet. You know, this morning and this afternoon, we're focused on the president. We're having to hold him back a little here because he's hard at work. He spoke to Senator McConnell today, Senator Graham. I just spoke with the chief of staff, and President Trump has talked to him about emergency declarations and stimulus. So we're just trying to make sure that he takes it easy, but he's hard at work and will continue to.
All right, let's get into it. The president reportedly now is showing some mild symptoms, and we saw Melania Trump tweeting out that she had mild symptoms. So this is not asymptomatic COVID-19, and we don't know what's ahead, but we're prayerful that it's going to be a speedy recovery. Tell me about what's happening right now with the president, how exactly they are both feeling.
Yeah, so he's having mild symptoms, but he's feeling good. He's in good spirits. I spoke to him last night, and he absolutely was hard at work and was feeling good then. He did a long Hannity interview right here on this network. So yes, he's feeling good, but again has those mild symptoms, as the chief confirmed this morning.
Well, look, I want to move on to something that's hard news. The New York Times is coming under fire for suggesting President Trump may not remain on the ballot. President Trump, it says, quote, revealed early Friday morning that he and the First Lady had tested positive for the coronavirus, throwing the nation's leadership into uncertainty. If he becomes sick, it could raise questions about whether he should remain on the ballot at all. Kayleigh, what's the response from the White House when you hear that from the Times?
What a ridiculous assertion by the New York Times. That may be the hope and the wish of the New York Times, but President Trump is the president of the United States. He's on the ballot. He's hard at work. And look, if you look at the jobs report just today, those remarkable numbers, getting below 8% unemployment, no one thought that was possible. It's a testament to what this president has done. He's put his head down. He's worked. He's continuing to do that, and he will all the way through November.
Real quickly, I don't know if you heard Karl Rove has come up with all these ways the president can actually work from home. And it was interesting. He talked about like a telephone town hall. He had quite a list. Will we see a national address from the president?
Look, I won't confirm exactly what you'll see from him, but it's safe to say that you'll be seeing and hearing from the president as he moves forward with his working schedule. We're exploring a number of different ways to do that, but he wants to talk to the American people. I can tell you this about President Trump. This man loves the American people, loves speaking to them directly, and nothing's going to stop him from doing just that.
All right. Appreciate you being with me to give me an update. Give my best to the First family.
Thank you, Harris.
And good to see you, Kayleigh.
Good to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you. The news of the president testing positive for the virus, injecting uncertainty into the markets almost immediately overnight. What all of this could mean for the economic recovery that we were just talking about with some decent job numbers, one of the president's biggest campaign talking points. What's going to happen with that? Steve Forbes joins me next.